2 minutes ago, the basketball internet lit up again. And this time, it is not just another highlight clip. It is a situation that has instantly divided fans across the entire WNBA world. Because a new wave of claims, reactions, and resurfaced comments involving Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark has started circulating online. And people are losing their minds trying to figure out what is real, what is context, and what is being blown out of proportion. Within minutes, social media went into full chaos mode. Clips were reposted. Old interviews were pulled back into circulation. And fan pages started breaking everything down frame by frame like they were trying to solve a mystery in real time. And right in the center of it all, Angel Reese's name, Caitlin Clark's name, and a conversation that refuses to slow down no matter how many times it gets addressed. But here's where things get even more intense. Because this isn't just about two players anymore. This is about teammates, narratives, and how quickly a single comment or interpretation can turn into a full-blown controversy online. Some fans are saying this proves there is deeper tension in the league than people want to admit. Others are saying it is just another case of social media twisting normal competition into something bigger than it really is. And in the middle of all this noise, emotions are running extremely high. Because every time Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark get mentioned in the same conversation, the internet doesn't stay calm for long. It explodes. And what just surfaced now has taken that reaction to a whole new level. Because people are asking one simple question. Is this finally the moment that explains everything everyone has been arguing about for months? Or is the internet once again turning basketball into a story that is bigger than reality? And the answer might change the entire way you look at this rivalry forever. To understand why this situation is blowing up again, you can't just look at the latest clip or the newest comment floating around social media. You have to look at the bigger picture. Because this story didn't start today, and it definitely didn't start quietly. It's been building for a long time. And at the center of it all are two names that have completely reshaped the conversation around women's basketball in the modern era: Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Caitlin Clark entered the scene as a generational offensive force. A player who didn't just score points but shifted attention wherever she went. Her deep shooting range, her confidence, and her ability to draw massive crowds turned every game into a national event. Suddenly, arenas were selling out in places that weren't used to that kind of demand. TV ratings spiked. Social media clips went viral within minutes. And the WNBA found itself in a spotlight it had never experienced at that level before. But with that spotlight came something else: pressure. Because when one player brings that much attention, everything around them gets magnified. Every foul, every reaction, every interaction on the court, and every debate off it. Then you have Angel Reese, who entered the league with her own massive following, her own identity, and her own momentum from college basketball, where she became one of the most talked-about players in the country. From the very beginning, she wasn't just a rookie either. She was already a brand, already a personality, already someone with strong opinions and strong reactions from fans on both sides. So when these two careers started running in the same league at the same time, the comparison was inevitable. And once comparisons begin in sports, they rarely stay simple. They grow, they evolve, they become narratives, and eventually, they become debates that fans carry far beyond the court. Every matchup, every highlight, every post-game interview started getting dissected. Some fans focused on performance, some focused on personality, some focused on media attention, and others focused on the bigger cultural conversation that started forming around both players. But what really made this situation different was how quickly everything moved online. In today's sports world, nothing stays contained anymore. A single quote can become a viral clip. A single reaction can become a headline. And a single interpretation can turn into a full narrative within hours. That's exactly what's been happening here. Because whenever Angel Reese is mentioned in relation to Caitlin Clark, the conversation doesn't stay neutral for long. It turns emotional, it turns divided, and it turns extremely fast. Some fans see rivalry, some fans see media exaggeration, and others believe there is a deeper tension that keeps surfacing in different ways over time. And that is where this latest wave of discussion comes in. Because now, old clips and resurfaced commentary are being pulled back into circulation again. And people are reanalyzing everything with fresh eyes, trying to connect patterns that may or may not actually be connected. And in that kind of environment, perception becomes reality very quickly. Even without new official statements, the internet fills in the gaps. Even without confirmation, narratives start forming. And even without context, emotions take over. So when something new surfaces, or even something old gets reinterpreted, it doesn't just stay as a small moment. It becomes part of a much larger story that fans have already been debating for months. And that is exactly why this situation has exploded again. Because people are no longer reacting to just one clip or one comment. They are reacting to everything they think it represents. And that leads us straight into the moment that triggered this entire new wave of reactions. The moment this new wave of clips starts spreading, the tone of the entire conversation shifts instantly. Because what looked like another recycled debate about WNBA personalities quickly turns into something much more intense online. It starts with short edits, a few seconds of a reaction here, a cropped interview there, a caption added on top that changes how the moment feels. And suddenly, thousands of people are watching the same fragments of content, but interpreting them in completely different ways. That's when the first real conflict erupts. Fans begin splitting into clear camps again. One side insists this is just normal competition talk being overanalyzed because of how viral both players have become. The other side believes there is an ongoing pattern of tension that keeps resurfacing whenever Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark are mentioned in the same conversation. And once that split happens, everything escalates. Comment sections turn into arguments, threads turn into debates, and debates turn into full-blown narrative wars. But the real twist doesn't come from anything officially new being said. It comes from interpretation. Because old clips start circulating again. Interviews, post-game reactions, commentary segments, all being re-examined under a new emotional lens. And when people re-watch old content with new expectations, they often see things differently. That's exactly what happens here. Suddenly, moments that were once seen as normal competitive exchanges are being framed as deeper meaning. Reactions that were once ignored are now being analyzed frame by frame, and every small detail is being treated like evidence of a larger story. That is where things begin to spiral. Because once the internet decides there is a hidden narrative, everything gets pulled into it. And that's exactly what's happening in this situation. Then comes the first major twist in perception. A new wave of commentary begins suggesting that the tension fans are reacting to might not come from a single moment, but from the pressure of constant comparison. Because every time Caitlin Clark has a big performance, Angel Reese gets brought into the conversation. And every time Angel Reese trends for any reason, Caitlin Clark gets mentioned alongside it. That constant overlap creates a cycle where neither player exists in isolation anymore. They exist in comparison, and comparison always intensifies emotion. But while fans debate that idea, another layer is added by online discussions pointing out something else: the media environment itself. Because in today's sports culture, coverage doesn't just report events, it frames them. Headlines, edits, commentary clips, and social media posts all influence how people perceive what they're watching. And when two high-profile athletes are constantly placed in overlapping narratives, the audience starts building connections, whether or not those connections were intentionally created. That's what makes this situation so complicated. Because even neutral moments start feeling loaded when they are placed inside an ongoing debate. And that is exactly why this story keeps resurfacing again and again. Then the second twist hits. A wave of fan reactions begins highlighting how emotionally invested people have become in defending one player or the other. It is no longer just about basketball skills. It is about identity, loyalty, and interpretation. Some fans believe Caitlin Clark represents a new era of visibility and growth for the league. Others believe Angel Reese represents confidence, competitiveness, and a different kind of basketball culture that also deserves recognition. And both perspectives are fueling the intensity. But instead of balancing the conversation, they are deepening the divide. Because now every discussion becomes a debate about fairness. Every clip becomes a talking point. And every reaction becomes part of a bigger argument that nobody fully controls anymore. Meanwhile, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark continue playing basketball, doing what they always do on the court. But the conversation around them has already moved far beyond the game itself. And that's the key shift. The sport is no longer just being watched, it is being interpreted in real time. And interpretation always creates disagreement. That disagreement is what drives the next wave of escalation. Because as more voices enter the conversation, analysts, former players, content creators, and casual fans, the narrative becomes louder, more emotional, and harder to contain. And just when it seems like things might stabilize again, a new layer of reaction emerges that pushes this entire story into even more uncertain territory, where perception and reality start blending together even more. At this point, the situation is no longer just a fan debate. It has become a full-scale media storm. Because once a narrative reaches this level of attention, it stops being driven by one source and starts being driven by everyone at the same time. Sports pages, reaction channels, analysts, former players, and casual fans all begin adding their own interpretation into the mix. And every new post adds more fuel to a fire that was already burning out of control. The key shift here is simple. Nobody is just watching anymore. Everyone is participating. And that changes everything. Because now, even the smallest clip gets treated like major evidence. A facial expression during a timeout, a brief exchange after a play, a post-game comment taken slightly out of context. All of it gets re-uploaded, slowed down, zoomed in, and analyzed from multiple angles. And in that process, meaning starts getting reshaped. This is where the escalation really begins. Because the more people try to explain the situation, the more interpretations multiply. Some fans argue that the entire conversation is being exaggerated because of how popular both players have become. Others insist that the level of attention itself proves how significant the underlying tension must be. And that contradiction is exactly what keeps the story alive. Then comes the so-called shocking reveal phase. Not one single event, but a wave of resurfaced commentary and discussion that reignites everything all over again. Old interviews resurface, past reactions get clipped and recirculated, and previous debates suddenly feel current again. But here's the twist that changes the tone of everything. People begin realizing that the controversy isn't coming from one moment. It is coming from accumulation. Every interaction between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark over time has been stored, replayed, and reinterpreted so many times that it has formed its own narrative ecosystem. And inside that ecosystem, even neutral moments get assigned meaning. That is why the conversation keeps escalating, because it is no longer anchored to one clear event. It is anchored to perception. Meanwhile, social media platforms amplify everything. Trending sections start reflecting the debate. Short clips get millions of views within hours. And comment sections turn into constant back-and-forth arguments between opposing viewpoints. Some users argue that the league should focus on celebrating growth and talent instead of fueling division through constant comparison. Others argue that the comparison is unavoidable because both players are now central figures in the league's public identity. And both sides feel justified in their perspective. That's what makes the situation so volatile. There is no single wrong or right interpretation that shuts the conversation down. Instead, there are competing truths depending on how someone chooses to view it. Then, another layer is added when analysts begin discussing the broader structure of modern sports media. And they point out how highlight culture, viral clips, and engagement-driven content naturally push narratives toward conflict because conflict generates attention. And attention drives everything: views, clicks, shares, discussion. That means the ecosystem itself rewards intensity. And when intensity becomes the reward, even neutral sports moments can evolve into controversial talking points. This is where the narrative becomes bigger than Angel Reese or Caitlin Clark individually. It becomes about how stories are built in the digital era. But emotionally, fans are still focused on the players. Because at the center of all this discussion are two athletes whose careers are now permanently linked in public perception. Every game they play adds another layer. Every performance adds another comparison. Every highlight adds another debate. And every silence leaves room for speculation. That is the cycle. And it is self-sustaining. But just when it feels like the conversation has reached its peak intensity, another wave of reactions begins forming. This time involving broader league dynamics, media framing, and how narratives are shaping public perception of women's basketball as a whole. And that is where everything starts to expand beyond the players themselves. At this stage, the conversation is no longer contained within sports fans alone. It has officially crossed into mainstream sports media, commentary circles, and wider cultural debate. Because when a storyline reaches this level of visibility, it stops belonging to just the game and starts belonging to the audience watching it. And the audience is now massive. Every major sports page is covering fragments of the discussion. Every analyst show has at least one segment breaking down what this means. And every social platform is saturated with clips, opinions, and reactions being pushed from every direction at once. But what makes this phase different is not just the volume of content, it's the emotional split it creates, because reactions are no longer neutral, they are divided. Some viewers believe the entire situation is being exaggerated due to the internet's obsession with rivalry narratives. They argue that competition has always existed in sports, but today it gets amplified into controversy because of how quickly content spreads. Others believe the situation reflects a deeper issue in how narratives are formed around high-profile athletes, and especially when two rising stars dominate attention at the same time. And neither side is backing down. That is what keeps the discussion alive. Former players begin weighing in as well, adding authority to both perspectives. Some emphasize that every generation of basketball has faced intense scrutiny and internal competition, and this is simply a modern version of that same cycle. Others highlight that the current level of visibility is unprecedented, and therefore the pressure and interpretation surrounding players today is far more intense than in previous eras. And once again, both viewpoints add more fuel instead of resolving anything, because every explanation creates more questions. Meanwhile, social media continues to act as the main engine driving the entire narrative forward. Short clips circulate without full context. Old moments are reshared with new captions, and reaction videos interpret the situation in completely different ways depending on the creator's perspective. This creates a fragmented version of reality where different audiences are essentially watching different versions of the same story. One group sees competition, another sees controversy, another sees media exaggeration, and another sees a deeper structural shift in how women's basketball is being discussed globally. That fragmentation is what makes the situation so powerful and so unstable. Because when there is no single shared understanding, every new clip feels like a new revelation. Even neutral highlights get pulled into the debate. Even unrelated interviews get reinterpreted. And even silence from the players becomes part of the conversation. Meanwhile, engagement numbers continue rising. More views, more comments, more debate, more breakdowns, and more analysis, which means the cycle is reinforcing itself in real time. The more people talk about it, the bigger it becomes. The bigger it becomes, the more people feel the need to respond. And the more responses appear, the more divided the audience becomes. Inside that environment, even official league communication gets scrutinized heavily. Every campaign, every promotional video, and every public statement is analyzed for hidden meaning or unintended messaging. And that adds another layer of pressure on how everything is perceived. Because now, nothing is just content anymore. Everything is interpreted as a signal, a message, a stance, or a reflection of internal dynamics. And that is why this phase is so important. Because it shows that the story is no longer just about two players. It is about how audiences consume, interpret, and amplify modern sports narratives in real time. And just when it seems like the conversation might start stabilizing into broader analysis, a new development shifts attention again, pulling the narrative back toward individual players and reigniting the emotional side of the debate. Just when it feels like the conversation might finally settle into something calmer, it shifts again. And this time, it shifts in a way that pulls everything back into the center of attention. Because the debate is no longer just floating around social media timelines or analyst panels. It is now circling back into direct comparisons, resurfaced moments, and renewed interpretations of everything that has already been discussed. And that is what makes this phase so explosive. Because people are no longer reacting to new information. They are re-evaluating old information with new emotion. And that always changes the outcome of how a story is understood. Clips that were once seen as normal competitive exchanges are now being replayed with different expectations. Comments that were once dismissed as typical sports talk are now being analyzed for tone, intent, and implication. And moments that were previously forgotten are suddenly being treated as missing pieces of a larger puzzle. This is where the final twist begins to form. Not through a single event, but through a shift in perception. That because the audience starts realizing something important. This entire situation has been shaped less by what was actually said, and more by how consistently it has been interpreted. And once that realization spreads, it changes the direction of the conversation again. Some fans begin stepping back and questioning whether the rivalry narrative has been amplified beyond what the on-court reality actually shows. Others double down, arguing that consistent patterns of commentary, reactions, and media framing are what created this perception in the first place. And both perspectives continue feeding into the cycle. But the most important shift happens here. The focus starts moving away from individual incidents and toward long-term impact. Because now the discussion is not just about who said what or who reacted how. It is about what these narratives are doing to the league itself. The visibility is higher than ever, the engagement is higher than ever, and the attention on women's basketball has reached levels that would have been unthinkable just a few seasons ago. But alongside that growth comes something more complicated. Constant scrutiny, constant comparison, constant interpretation, and constant debate. Every moment becomes content, every interaction becomes analysis. And every player becomes part of a larger storyline whether they intend to be or not. That is the reality the league is operating in now. And inside that reality, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are no longer just individual athletes in separate roles. They have become symbols within a much larger conversation about visibility, growth, media framing, and public perception. And that is why the debate refuses to fade. Because it is no longer tied to one situation. It is tied to the way modern sports are consumed. Then comes the final shift in tone. As the conversation expands, more voices begin asking whether this level of comparison is sustainable long-term. Because when every performance is measured against another player, when every highlight is turned into a debate, and when every narrative is immediately reframed online, it creates an environment where clarity becomes rare and emotion becomes dominant. That is the space this story now exists in. And just when it seems like things might move toward resolution, a final question begins circulating again across platforms. The kind of question that doesn't answer anything, but changes how everything is viewed from this point forward. Is this really about rivalry between players? Or is it about how quickly modern sports culture turns two rising stars into opposite sides of the same story? And as that question spreads, the next wave of reactions is already starting to build. And just like that, the conversation doesn't end. It never really does. Because every time this story starts to calm down, something brings it right back into the spotlight again. A clip resurfaces. A comment gets reinterpreted. A new game adds another layer. And suddenly, the debate is alive all over again. What makes this situation so powerful is that it is no longer just about two players. It has become something much bigger than that. It is about how the league is growing, how fans are reacting, and how every single moment in modern sports gets turned into a narrative within minutes. Caitlin Clark continues to draw massive attention wherever she goes. Angel Reese continues to generate strong reactions wherever she is discussed. And the league continues to evolve under a level of visibility it has never experienced before. But with that visibility comes constant conversation, constant comparison, and constant interpretation. And that is exactly why this story refuses to disappear. Because people are not just watching basketball anymore. They are watching meaning being created in real time. So now the question is not whether this story exists. The question is how you see it. Do you think the media and fans are overanalyzing normal competition and turning it into unnecessary drama? Or do you think this is exactly what happens when two major personalities reshape a league at the same time? There is no neutral ground in this conversation anymore. Everyone has an opinion, and every opinion adds fuel to the debate. So I want to hear from you. Where do you stand on this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because this is one of those topics where every perspective matters, and every reaction adds to the story. And if you want more deep breakdowns like this, where sports, controversy, and culture collide in real time, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next development in this story could change everything again. And when it does, you will want to be here for it. Until then, the conversation continues.